Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hillary. Megan Neale is the co-founder and COO at Limitless Technology, based in London, UK. Limitless is a GigCX platform that allows brands to work with experts, so their customers are connected directly to advisors who are also fans and customers of the same brand. Now, we've talked a few times about GigCX on this podcast, but this interview gives even more detail on how GigCX works and what the opportunities might be as the vaccine rollout might finally lead to the end of this COVID pandemic. Okay, now let's go straight to the interview with Megan Neale. Okay, Megan, thanks for coming on to the podcast. Now, I know that we've had conversations about the gig economy regarding GigCX, and the gig economy itself is often misunderstood. You know, there's often an assumption, especially in the media, that it's focused on low wages, poor working conditions, a sort of race to the bottom. And I know that you've directly tried to address this with your Good Gig principles. Could you explain your approach to the gig economy and what precisely the principles are all about then?
Yes, certainly. Very, very happy to do that. And actually, very pleased to say that actually our Good Gig principles are at the heart of absolutely everything that we do at Limitless. And perhaps if I take a step back and tell you a short story, that will help you understand why. Actually, my background and the background of my business partner, Roger, who I founded Limitless with, is building and running large-scale outsourced contact centers. So we've really been in this industry and sector for many, many years, 20 plus years. And over the course of those years, obviously, we had the usual challenges of continually bringing in the exceptional talent that we wanted to deliver on our clients' needs and retaining them. And we know that's one of the biggest challenges that the industry faces today is the attrition. But for me, when I observed the environment that we had in our business, I was really amazed in particular by one story, a lady called Chanda, who'd worked with us for many years. She delivered outstanding quality all of the time, and her attitude to work was simply positive, consistently, day in, day out. And when I looked at the makeup of that, I wanted, we've all had that feeling in a contact center of how can we bottle that, or how can we clone that person, that they're simply, we would like them 1,000 times over. And I really observed that she was part-time, was one of the key drivers in her being able to maintain such high energy levels, high enthusiasm levels, and consistently deliver amazing quality to her customers that she was engaging with. And really, we took that as a very simple concept and thought, how can we bottle that? How can we take the magic sauce of working part-time, feeling in complete control of everything that you're doing to deliver outstanding quality? And that was the foundation of our Good Gig Charter, actually, really making sure that we enable a scenario in gig where people feel completely in control. They're never, ever forced to do anything. There's no pressure to complete a task if they don't want to complete a task. And aligned to that, making sure that they're rewarded completely fairly. I think we're probably all aware of one of the big challenges in our industry is that we are not able to pay much more than minimum wage in most contact center environments the world over. And actually, the role that these individuals play is so critical to business success. And if we want to attract the right talent and bring the right talent into the organization, really we need to find ways to reward more and pay more and reward more fairly. So those two key principles for us in the Good Gig Charter are around making sure people feel in control of their own destiny. They're not pressured to do anything. They have complete flexibility and choice over what they do. They're rewarded fairly according to their talents and the work that they do. And also, a third factor is making sure that wherever they are in the world, they are protected. Gig legislation is emerging in many markets. It's complex in many markets, and it's very difficult for people to understand what they can and can't do, what they should and shouldn't do. So at Limitless, we took the view very, very early on that we wanted to do things right. We engaged with PwC, who now are our global partner, to manage all of our legislation for terms and conditions for our gig experts the world over. And that's really to make sure that people are fully protected in whatever market they're operating in. So it's really, really very dear to our heart, and something that will carry on being part of the Limitless ethos and mission for many, many years to come.
Well, that's interesting, because you talked about the flexibility in hours actually creating the ability to be much more focused and to perform better at work. And I know we've seen a lot of companies in this industry sending their people home because of the COVID pandemic. But they've also started talking about how this allows them to create an increased flexibility. And I suppose, if you already have a flexible work from home team, then how is that differentiated from what you've created with a team of gig-based contributors?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, firstly, I just sort of want to share that I was absolutely thrilled and amazed to see how so many BPOs and contact centers over the course of the last year have really managed to create quite a seismic shift from kind of contact center bricks and mortar operations to home working operations, and really proud that the whole industry has stepped up to make that happen. I think that's a phenomenal effort to protect jobs and also to continue to provide, really important services to the world's economy. I think it's been easier in some markets than it has in others. Onshore locations where people have different facilities at home compared to offshore locations where perhaps the internet and also working conditions at home aren't quite so easy. But I think those businesses that have made the shift and are still having to work in a work from home model because of the COVID situation in their local markets are probably recognizing that it's a very different business model to a traditional bricks and mortar, and they're having to bring in new frameworks and processes to support that properly. But thinking about the principal differences between a work from home model, which I do think there's a very important place for in the whole service ecosystem, and the GigCX model, I think there are four key differences, really. The first one is that in the work from home model, typically the individual is someone who has similar skill sets to an agent that would be in a call center. They've been recruited perhaps within a geographic location to, where team managers and quality managers can support with customer service skills and maybe some ancillary skills. Whereas in the gig model, you're really opening up your opportunity to the whole global talent. There are no limits to where you can source skills from. So you are, through the gig model, able to tap into customers of the brands that you're supporting. And within that customer segment, people with specific skills that you are looking for. So it introduces a different skill set into that working model. The second reason is that the work from home models are largely, these agents are paid per hour. So they are still on a hourly rate payment basis. It's the mechanism that everybody uses. Whereas in a gig model, people are paid per task or even per partial task, depending on the contribution to that task that they have. The third area is that in the work from home model, the agents are typically scheduled, and that they might be scheduled on smaller numbers of hours rather than full 8-hour shifts. They may even be scheduled on 2 to 3 hour shifts, but they are still typically scheduled. It's a variation of the current bricks and mortar model. Whereas again, in the gig world, they're completely unscheduled. If you think about the Uber drivers, there's no scheduling there. They simply pick up tasks, and they pick up the tasks that they know are good for them and that they know they will do well at. And that contributes significantly to quality, actually. In a call center world, people are typically picking up the next task available to them, and there's no guarantee that that's going to be something that is in their sweet spot or something that they may struggle to do and still need skills to develop to learn. Whereas in the gig world, you have complete choice over what you work on, which naturally amplifies the CSAT. And I think the fourth area that's different around work from home versus gig is the work from home models are typically service-based models. So you're purchasing people. Whereas the gig model, you're really purchasing the outcome, which is a service outcome, but it's powered by a platform. And that platform is the gig platform with all the marketplace dynamics built in to ensure that the gig model works at scale.
Yeah, I think that those four attributes of GigCX really do need to be more understood across the marketplace, because in conversations we've had, we're always comparing traditional contact center and BPO to GigCX, and yet there's actually many different attributes to GigCX that makes it a different kind of proposition. I was wondering, because of what you've just said about these four different attributes of GigCX, are there ways in which a gig-based approach can actually improve CX? Can you interact with customers in a different way that would differ from the traditional contact center?
Yeah, it's really interesting because it seems counterintuitive. It seems completely counterintuitive. How can you invite in groups of experts or customers who are using the products and services that you want to support, and how can they, without 3 to 6 months of training or coaching or graduation bays, how can they, without sort of sitting in the same room as other people, possibly deliver even the same level of customer experience, let alone better? And really, it's a win-win. What we've seen is that the real benefits of customer experience are linked to the quality and knowledge of the individuals that are joining the gig platform. And that's because people joining the gig platform are being invited in by the brands. So what's an incredibly important part here is that the brands already know who their most passionate, loyal customers are. And it's simply by engaging with those brands to invite in a segment of customers who are displaying traits of loving the brand already, to see if they'd like to join the program. And then quite simply through the gig onboarding process at Limitless, they go through a qualification process. They have to demonstrate that they have the right skills and aptitude, and then they're permitted to download our apps and platform and start to support customers in a very highly controlled, quality controlled way. So all of the control mechanisms that you have in a call center are replicated within the GigCX platform. But the added benefit is that you're bringing people in who know and love that brand already and or have additional skill sets. And what that does, the outcome of that means that the speed to competency is significantly reduced. Just some examples, some of our technical sort of customers, Microsoft being the one, in the Windows tech support area, the speed to competency in a traditional model could be 3 to 6 months. That's not uncommon. Whereas when you're bringing in people who already have those technical skills, are already customers, the speed to competency, quite incredibly, is 1 to 2 weeks. And that's really just to get used to processes. I think the other major contributor to improved customer experience is the ability now to tap into this incredible, flexible, agile resource pool. One of the big reasons for dissatisfaction is, of course, that you just don't get a response quick enough. You're left on hold, or the chat window is not available, or the resolution is not there first time. So being able to tap into this resource pool that very simply has much more availability than contact centers. Contact centers, because they are scheduled, have very fixed productivity levels, and therefore there's no scope for incremental. We all know we get into backlogs very quickly if things go more than 10 or 20% over forecast. Whereas in a gig model, people are underutilized. They're doing maybe 5 to 10 tickets a day. They're doing maybe 50 to 100 over the course of 1 to 2 weeks. Therefore, the scope to take on more work when it's available, and they get alerted through the platform, is there. So we see this soaking up of unpredicted, is that the right word? Peaks, really, really easily. So actually the concept of getting into a backlog situation just doesn't really exist if you deploy a gig model very quickly. And I think those two things really contribute to improved conversations, because you can get up to speed quicker, being much more flexible. And of course, you can do both of those things while saving money, because in the gig model, we strip out the middleman, and clients are saving sort of 30 to 50% on an equivalent cost per case basis.
Yeah, and I think that what's really important about that point is just the difference in approach to hiring the advisors. I mean, if a let's say a consumer electronics company went to a customer service expert and said, we need a contact center with maybe 200 FTEs, they would then go off to LinkedIn and start hiring people with customer service experience. And what you're saying is, well, actually, we would go to Instagram and ask the brand themselves to pick out the people who clearly seem to have the most affinity with the brand, and then ask them to see if they can fit into the customer service process.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And because we're not asking people to sign up to full-time jobs or even, commit to certain hours on a day, week, monthly basis, the attraction of that model is incredibly high. And actually, we've seen over the course of the last year, the attraction of that become even more important, because people's lives have been so severely impacted by COVID. People have lost jobs in the worst case scenario, certainly reduced earning potential because of things that are happening around in their families. So we've actually seen, a huge uplift in demand for people wanting to become gig experts on the Limitless platform. And as a result of that, that brings an enormous amount of talent and opportunity that almost any brand can tap into. So it's really a perfect storm, in the sense that our clients are often looking for ways to engage with their own consumers and customers in a much more intimate way. And this allows them to achieve that. And it not only allows our clients to give back, it also allows them to learn from those relationships from the customers. And that helps overall in the development of their proposition or their go-to-market strategies.
Yeah, and that seems to be a great strategy, because you're not only building a contact center or a customer service operation, but you're actually sort of empowering potentially hundreds of advocates. Suddenly people are already fans of the brand, and now they're getting paid to evangelize for the brand as well. So, I mean, it seems everybody wins from that. I mean, what's the experience of your advisors over the past year, especially because it's been so challenging? But I know that when I talk to most contact center or BPO companies, they're in this endless struggle to manage attrition, and they have to hire a lot more than they actually need for the number of seats, because there's people endlessly leaving. And it's not uncommon to see, a complete replacement of everybody across the course of a year. So I mean, when you talk to your people, what's the, I mean, I suppose if you're comparing, what's the attrition rate, perhaps?
Yeah, certainly. Well, it is amazing that for a gig model where there's no expectation, there's no requirement, there's no need to commit, the churn is incredibly low, and that's because people are free to come and go as they choose. We see less than 5% churn rates on a monthly basis, let alone broader than that. And that's because people might do something for a month, nothing for the next month, come back the next month. It's really complete control. It might help if I kind of share a little bit about kind of the profile of the experts that we see on the platform, and because it's a bit different for everybody. People do it for different reasons, and I think that's what I found most fascinating about this. And one of the things that just makes us really proud about what we have built and will continue to really build and develop. There are really around 5 cohorts of people who work in the platform. The first, and this is kind of pre and post COVID, there's slightly different slants on it, but parents at home has been a really interesting group for us. Those that want to stay in touch with the work environment, but have made a decision to commit to their family for whatever period of time. We've seen that actually change during COVID, obviously, as homeschooling has become much more of a thing, and parents have used it as a way of just doing something for themselves, as opposed to carrying on to support their children at home. Another big cohort is students. So we see a huge number of students, tend to be more mature students. So the first year of university is not a great year to sort of get people's attention. Other things are typically on their mind, pre-COVID, post-COVID, perhaps less so. But certainly those doing masters and MBAs have been a really, really attractive group for us. They're committed to their studies. A really interesting group is semi and fully retired individuals. This is a really powerful group, and I'm going to sort of say 55 plus, I would say. A really important group that are very digitally savvy, so very able to support, and also have an amazing wealth of life skills that really a lot of clients and brands have wanted to tap into for so many years. But in a contact center model, typically you're really only able to attract that kind of entry level role, much more junior or much younger, typically resource pool that just don't have the life skills that facilitate a much more deep and rich conversation. We also have historically pre-COVID a group around what I would call commuters. So people who are sort of on, middle income, but have a little bit more time on their hands in the morning, lunchtime and evening, perhaps in kind of caring professions, teaching assistants, teachers, who are looking to support their income and enjoy helping other people. And then we have full-time giggers. So this is a growing group, people who are exiting either their work or education and deciding, no, I don't want 9 to 5 or 8 to 8, Monday to Sunday. I actually want to be in control of things that I want to do and that flex with my lifestyle. And when we do research of these groups of people, the kind of 3 key trends come out in terms of why do they do this? Why be an expert on the Limitless platform? The first is that they love helping people, and that's our industry the world over. You don't go to work in a contact center unless you personally get a kick out of helping people. You wouldn't last a week if you didn't, right? That's why we do it. The second is that they feel privileged to support the brands that they love. You know yourself, the brands that you have an affinity with, and you know that by helping someone also get some benefit from that brand, that's going to give you a sense of satisfaction. If it's a brand you really don't care about, you don't get that same sense of satisfaction. There's a real emotional connection between the brand there. And then the third area, and it really genuinely is the third, is they earn really, really fair rewards. They're well compensated for what they do. They can earn more doing this than they can earn in a contact center. And we model that, and depending on what jurisdiction they're in, and make sure that they can and are earning higher rates than a typical contact center. And it really, to me, that whole sort of those 3 things is epitomized in a conversation that we had with one of our experts called John, who's a retired IT consultant. He's been on the platform a long time, and he simply said, Limitless gives me a sense of purpose. Limitless makes me feel useful again. And for me, that's really, really powerful. There is we have an aging population. There's a wealth of skills out there that we should tap into. And what we're doing is actually really important for people's self-esteem as much as it is important for the economies in which we support worldwide.
I think that's a really powerful message that's often overlooked in all the kind of froth around GigCX. We often miss this particular point around diversity. And, every company has a diversity message, and whether they take it seriously or whether they consider it just an essential part of their annual report is a moot point. But what you're saying here is you're removing the barriers to companies actually being inclusive. And so if somebody in their 60s or 70s wants to contribute a couple of hours a day, they can do it. They don't need to commute, work 8 hours a day in a contact center full of 22-year-olds. So you're actually making it possible for people who may find it difficult to commute, who may find it difficult to do an 8-hour day, who may just feel uncomfortable in a contact center. So I think that's really powerful. I was going to ask you about the the improvement in go-to-market speed, but I think that you answered that when you talked about the Microsoft example and being able to, by focusing on the expertise rather than the customer service aptitude, you're really able to go to market much faster. So I think maybe we should just look at 2021. I mean, what should we expect next from GigCX? I mean, are there any trends or developments that you think that we will be focusing on or that will become more important in the year ahead?
Yeah, I think it's pretty difficult to predict, I think, what's going to happen. We're obviously very fortunate to have vaccines being rolled out the world wide over. So, we hope to return to some sense of normality. If I kind of take that macro lens off and think about what's specifically happening in the CX space, I think there are I'm seeing three major trends, I would say, and I'd be really interested in the audience's view on these. The first actually is seeing a big shift away from synchronous live chat messaging to asynchronous engagements. I think we've spent probably 10 years deploying live chat to varying degrees of success across many, many brands. And businesses are now realizing that there are many more opportunities for streamlining the operations and resourcing structure if we move to an asynchronous model. And what I mean by asynchronous is things like WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, just SMS, where, again, it's about each participant being in control of when they want to engage. And we know the challenges with live chat and the AHTs, I think, for those operators listening, with live chat, it can be particularly difficult to resource and manage on a consistent level. So seeing a big shift now in the B2B2C space of deploying the channel for consumers to engage with brands as being asynchronous. Now, what does that do? That one is something that consumers are desiring because they're using it in their own consumer lives, and I think that's how we want to engage with brands. But that introduces a lot more opportunities for us to resource that asynchronous channel in a much more effective way and plug in a GigCX model much easier. So that's the second big trend for me, is really how, as a result of looking at the channel strategy, we are now seeing the evolution of a streamlined resourcing ecosystem. So we don't think GigCX is going to replace call centers in their entirety. We do think there's a really important role for call centers to play when there is specific access to tools and systems needed to support customers. And actually, GigCX, when deployed correctly, and you take the cost savings in GigCX, means that you can invest in those contact center operations, pay people what they deserve. That's obviously what I'm incredibly passionate about. But this streamlined ecosystem, leveraging asynchronous as the core channel, means you can start with AI. So you can start with your chatbot at whatever degree of maturity you are with that. But most organizations are deploying some form of virtual assistant to kind of kick off the engagement and try and understand the customer's intent. You can then route to the GigCX to get your amazing real-time customer experience, very quick response times at a price point that is really attractive. And then you can provide incredible support via your agent resourcing models, whether they're in-house or outsourced. So we're seeing that as a major trend, kind of pulling all these three disparate pieces that have sort of just stuck in different silos across the organization, maybe in different innovation pots, into one much more cohesive strategy. And then the third area of the trend is really looking at, okay, now I've got this amazing resource pool, right people, right place, right time. I've got the right channels. Where do I deploy those? And we're seeing a big trend in deploying that resource at different stages of the customer journey to deliver a higher return on investment and real business value. And what I mean by that is taking the customer service part away from just being a destination. You have to go to the contact us page to get help, moving up the customer journey into, I'm just signing up to a product, I'm on the registration page, I don't quite know what to do, I hesitate, I drop out. At that point, someone should be engaging to help to convert you to get to the next stage. And those business metrics and improvement metrics are really, really powerful, but can only be achieved if you've got the right resourcing model behind to support that in a cost-effective way. Otherwise, it's just simply too expensive to do. Yeah. So those are my three big themes, and very passionate. And I know lots of organizations will be working through some of those challenges this year.
No, I definitely agree with that. And just as a final point, I commented on LinkedIn recently where I was suggesting that we should be moving from live chat to asynchronous. And somebody commented saying, we already have asynchronous communication. It's called email.
Yes, no, I completely agree. And I think part of the problem with email has been that the operators amongst us have deprioritized email as a channel that we use to fill in the gaps when we have some free time from not answering phone calls, and therefore the response times on email are very poor. So it isn't a channel we want to use. So asynchronous response times need to be quick in order for it to work. The expectation needs to be minutes, not hours and days.
Thanks for downloading the CX Files podcast. If you have a moment, please give us a star rating or review on your favorite podcast provider, because this really helps other people to find the podcast. If you have any suggestions for future guests, or ideas, people or topics, then please just find myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan on LinkedIn and send a suggestion.